in and introduce, and then I'll
Okay.
introduce Beth, okay?
Recording is in progress. Okay, on behalf of the Adult Education Committee, I want to say that this has been a really wonderful, successful time, and the attendance has been great. And we have to kind of grapple with where do we go from here. And, you know, the Adult Education Committee is like 4 or 5 people who meet once a month, and we try to figure out what people are going to like and what people will attend and what they won't and what people are interested in. And sometimes that's guesswork, and sometimes we guess right and sometimes we guess wrong. This was a pretty good guess. I think we're doing really well. Since I have a captive audience of 20 or so folks here, I'd like to capture that captive audience a little bit and say what I'd like to ask you to do tonight, particularly those of you who are Southminster members, and others as well. There's a couple names here I don't recognize, but whatever. Would be to, at some point in tonight's meeting, go into chat, give us your name to let us know you were here, and then do one of 2 things. Offer any suggestions you might have about what you would like to see happen next. We can do more really organized classes like this one. We can do kind of open discussion forums on current issues. We can do more personal things. We can do more biblical things. We can do a whole lot of different things, but we need to know what you're interested in. So your first option is just give us whatever comments you want to give us or during the course of tonight's class about what you might like to see next, and whether you think this Monday night time frame works better for you than early Sunday morning, which is what we mostly used to do. So give us any input you want to give us on that. Or
this is a topic.
The second option is, if you really want to just step up your involvement just a little level more than that, also put in your email address in the chat. And when we have ideas about like what we might want to do next, we'll have a little email list of people who are interested in adult education that we can quiz. You know, we can send. This is like a step short of actually joining the committee. If you actually want to join the committee, you can do that. I'm not stopping anyone from doing that, okay? But short of joining the committee, if you want to identify yourself as a person who is kind of interested in these sorts of educational opportunities and might want to have some input in what we do in the future, please put your email in the chat, and we will run some future ideas past whoever is on that list. And we'll see how that works as sort of a focus group, an interest group for adult education stuff. And I guess that's all I had to say about that. Kathy, make sure we record or we save whatever is in the chat tonight, or can you take care of that? And anyway, any questions? Otherwise, we'll turn it back to Scott for the Tao of Delgarno or whatever tonight's.
Oh, no. I'm going to introduce our presenter and then put myself on mute and invite others to do the same until y'all have questions and things to add. So I'm just thrilled that my friend Beth Enos from the other side of the river in the Irvington area is presenting for us. She is a young retired professor of contract law at Lewis and Clark Law School. So I hope, will write a memoir someday, you know, with the title that's something like From Contract Law to Lao Tzu. And that would be just perfectly in keeping, because I don't know of anything further from but maybe it's actually totally on par that, and maybe we'll hear if that's the case. So I'm just going to put myself on mute and enjoy the scenery.
Well, thank you. And yes, Scott, actually, it's contracts and Taoism are a lot closer than you would imagine. So I'm really happy to be with everybody today. And something just happened to my screen where now I'm big on the screen. But I wanted, can I keep the gallery view so I can see everybody?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay,
You may need to go back and select gallery again.
okay, all right, I can do that.
It's just usually a little easier when someone's presenting if we use that to, because not everyone knows how to put it in speaker view or whatever. So we just spotlight the speaker for everyone.
I think that's fine. And I understand for recording and everything, that's important too. But for me, I know what I look like, so I would kind of like to see everybody else. So I think I can do that. Yeah, okay. I've got the crowd back now. Thank you for walking me through that. Some of you who came on after Kathy and I were talking at the beginning, Kathy's been great in helping me with the technological preparation for this. And I was telling Scott earlier that everybody needs a Kathy. You just got to have a Kathy to kind of help you through all of this. So thank you. All right. So now I can see all of you again, except those of you who don't have your video on, and that's fine. I can see your names. Really happy to be here. I was delighted when Scott asked me to do this. I've actually done this once before for a church group, for a different Presbyterian church group that was doing a similar kind of adult education course. So this is a very fun thing for me to be able to talk to people about something that has been a big part of my life and something that I love. And how often do you get to just, share that? So thank you for having me here tonight. So is anybody in here old enough to remember the 7-Up advertising campaign that had 7-Up as the Uncola? Does anybody remember 7-Up, the Uncola? Okay. Well, in trying to figure out how to introduce myself to you as someone who is speaking on this topic, I thought, well, the best way to introduce myself is to say I am the unexpert of Taoism. So I'm not a scholar of religion or East Asian studies. Taoism is not the religion of my family or my culture. So I can only speak from my own experience with this topic. So just understand that, please. So in introducing that and how I came to be engaged with Taoism, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about how I met Taoism and began a relationship. In the early 70s, I dropped out of college and I went out west to be a back to the land hippie, which I did for a number of years and lived out in a shack in the middle of nowhere. And somewhere during that time, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but this book came into my awareness. This is not the exact copy I had at the time, but this is the Tao Te Ching. And it caught my attention. It was filled with this cryptic poetry about reality and how to live. It spoke of nature, both in the sense of the, nature in the sense of the natural world, but also nature in the sense of our nature, our inner nature. And it spoke of simplicity. And it really appealed to my rebellious, back to the land self of that time. It didn't have much in the way of, rules or required beliefs or organization. And so, I was living out in the mountains thinking, this is, really speaking to me here. So this began really a lifelong engagement with this teaching. that is really both quite mysterious and at the same time very practical. So tonight we're going to focus a little bit more. I'll give you a little preview of what we're going to do. Tonight we're going to focus a little bit more on the mystery part of this, and then next week we'll focus a little bit more on the practical application of it. Over the years, as Scott already suggested, I returned to civilization and went back to school and became a lawyer. I was lucky enough to go live overseas for a number of years as in my career, including 3 years in Thailand, which, as you probably know, is a Buddhist country. So that was very interesting in terms of being exposed to, another religious culture. And about 30 years ago, moved back to Portland and got a job teaching law at Lewis and Clark Law School. And through all of that, I found wisdom in many different sources, including the Bible and many other wisdom teachings. But the Tao Te Ching, or Taoism, was always kind of a thread and kind of a foundational grounding, I guess, for me is maybe the way to describe it. And so about 10 years ago, I decided I really wanted to go deeper into this teaching. So I cleared off my dining room table and I got out all my Tao Te Ching translations. I have quite a few, but only a few of all of them that are out there. You might be interested to know that the Tao Te Ching, which is sort of the central text of Taoism, has been translated more than any other book in history except the Bible. So I only have a few of those many translations, but I have more than I need. So anyway, I spread them all out on my dining room table, and my thought was I'm going to take a section at a time and I'm going to look at the different translations, and not to analyze them or decide which one was right or wrong, but really just to contemplate them, to kind of see how different people interpreted this teaching. And it was pretty quick that I realized that was not going to be enough for me, that I really wanted to go back to the original Chinese characters of the text. No, I'm not, I don't speak Chinese, and I'm not fluent Chinese, so don't get all excited about that. So I got a classical medieval Chinese dictionary and some other books and used some online resources, and I just started at the beginning. I just took a little section at a time and I looked at each character and all the different meanings that it could hold. And it became really my basic spiritual practice during that time. And again, not to translate it myself. Goodness knows there are enough translations out there already. But to contemplate it in its original language. And what I found was this fluidity of meaning and a beauty of rhythm that was just necessarily lost in translation. And it became a really profound process for me. And I didn't set out with any agenda. I didn't plan to go through the whole thing. I didn't have a schedule. I just sat down with it when time allowed. But as a matter of fact, I did end up going through the entire text of the Tao Te Ching this way. It took me 2.5 years. And by the end of that, I realized that it was really something that had deeply affected my life and brought me into sort of a deeper connection with the sacred. And I wanted to share that. So I started writing a blog about that and leading a twice monthly contemplation group focused on the wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. So as you can tell from what I said, I'm pretty short on official credentials to be here talking to you, but I'm pretty long on years of experience of loving this text and letting it inform a lot of my life And that's what I'm real excited to share with you all. So let's talk about Taoism a little bit. So if 7-Up is the uncola and I'm the unexpert, Taoism can pretty much be described as the unreligion. I'm always a little, I'm not amused, but curious about its inclusion in these isms, right? You know, I think, well, what kind of ism is it? And that's not entirely accurate, because there actually is a branch of Taoism that you would recognize with the familiar trappings of religion. There is a branch of Taoism that has deities and temples and priests and rituals. But the branch of Taoism that we're more familiar with in the West is what's called philosophical Taoism. It's not so much a set of beliefs or a creed like, you know, we might be familiar with in Christianity. Doesn't really have rules of behavior or social order like you all discussed with respect to Confucianism. It doesn't really even have a path geared towards some kind of attainment like some types of Buddhism have. It's more a way of living in a natural harmony with the creative flow of energy in the universe, which sounds like really woo-woo and way out there, but that's the mystery part of it. It'll get more practical next week, so stay tuned for this. Stay tuned for that. So I wanted to share this character with you. This is the character for Tao, and this character can mean way or path. It can mean a simple path, like a path that you hike along in the, you know, in the forest. It can mean the, you know, sort of the way that you go. It can mean like the way things are, or the way, you know, sort of the nature of reality, I suppose. When I start talking about that, about the way things are, the way things are done, I always think, do any of you watch The Mandalorian, that show? Yeah, they have the saying there, this is the way, in The Mandalorian. So that's kind of their little code mantra in that TV show. So the Tao is sort of known as, you know, is often translated as the way. And many of you may already be familiar with aspects of Taoism. Some of you might know that, and some of you might be familiar with aspects of Taoism that you didn't even realize really are connected to Taoism. Of course, there's books. There's the Tao Te Ching. There's the Tao of Pu. There's the Tao of Physics. Scott was talking about if I ever wrote a book, and when I was teaching law, I thought if I ever write anything in the legal area, I'm going to call it the Tao of Contracts. I never got around to writing that, and I probably won't at this time, but it would have been really good. You would have liked it. Another symbol from Taoism that you might be familiar with, some of you might know this symbol. We're going to talk about this symbol a little bit more next week, but just to show you that this is something that comes from Taoism as well that you might not realize. Do any of you, or have any of you ever practiced Tai Chi or Qigong? Anything like that? Yeah, one hand, yeah. That comes right from Taoism as well. Have any of you ever had an acupuncture treatment? There you go. Have any of you ever rearranged the furniture in your house according to principles of feng shui? Look at all the Taoists we have in this group. See, you just didn't even know it. You all are already, this is how Taoism is. It's like you're Taoist and you don't even really know you are. It's like the stealth religion, right? It just sort of creeps into your life and you don't even know it. We have some sayings in English that come out of the Tao Te Ching. Some of you might have heard the saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Straight out of the Tao Te Ching, except if you actually look at the Chinese characters, it says the journey of 1,000 miles begins under the feet, which is a slightly little different thing, which means no matter where you are on your journey is right under your feet. So I actually like that translation a little better. Anyway, all of these things that I've just mentioned, some of which you're already familiar with, all come out of Taoism. So, like, where did Taoism come from? As I already said, we have this original text. A lot of people trace the origin of Taoism back to this text, but actually I'm quite sure that the principles of Taoism were practiced long before anything was ever actually written down. This text was written about 2,500 years ago, which is kind of interesting in terms of the timing of it, because it was a contemporary, something that arose in the same time period as Buddhism and Confucianism. So Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism all arose basically in the same time period, which is kind of interesting if you think about how they became major traditions in their cultures and beyond their cultures, but they all kind of came out of the same time period. The book, the Tao Te Ching, was attributed to someone named Lao Tzu. However, we're not sure, like many ancient writings, whether he really existed and if he really wrote this. The name Lao Tzu means old person. So if he did exist, I wonder if that was really his name. I suspect maybe it wasn't. But in any event, there's a great legend about the writing of the Tao Te Ching, so I thought I would share that with you. So the legend is that Lao Tzu was a government official and became disenchanted with the corruption and inefficiency of government and decided to chuck it and go out into the wilderness. I think he was maybe the original back to the land hippie, and I think that's why I like him so much. So he gets on an ox and he decides he's leaving it all behind. So he heads out and he gets to this pass, and there's a gatekeeper at this pass. The legend is a little murky at this point. I don't know how the gatekeeper knew that he was who he was, but apparently the gatekeeper said, "Oh, please, before you go, please write down your wisdom." So he goes, okay. And apparently he sat down and wrote out basically 5,000 words. It's not a long text. Basically, it's 5,000 characters, and got back on his ox and rode off into the sunset, never to be heard from again. So, like many of these kinds of stories, you have to wonder where it came from and question its accuracy, but it's a great story, isn't it? So that's the one we're going to stick with. So this text that he wrote down, we don't have that. We don't have the original text. So what we have are later copies that showed up at different times throughout history. And one of the most recent discoveries of some of the passages from this text was discovered only in 1993 in a tomb in China, small tomb kind of out on a farm somewhere. And I have a photo that I'm going to ask Kathy to put on the screen here, some bamboo strips that they discovered in this tomb that had the passages from the Tao Te Ching written on it.
Should I put that up now?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
I can do it.
Yeah.
There, can you see it?
There we go. I can see it. Can everybody see it? Okay. So these were the actual, what you're looking at is a photo of some of the several thousand bamboo strips that were discovered in this tomb with these characters written vertically on the strips. So the way these were really put together in a text was that they were written vertically and they were tied together with some kind of thread. And you read from right to left, top to bottom, right to left. And you can see that there are it's not really divided into chapters. The Tao Te Ching as we know it today is divided into 81 chapters. But you can see in these bamboo strips that there's no division, there's no punctuation. We don't know where a sentence begins or ends. We don't know where one section, well, it ends up we call it chapters, but we don't know where a section really stops. So all of the division into chapters and sentences really came later. But this was the original material that they had to work with. And even though this was the most recently discovered, it's actually dated to some of the oldest versions of the text that are now in existence. So thank you, Kathy. You can take that off. I just wanted to show everybody. So that's sort of where it came from. And out of that then developed these various branches of Taoism and traditions, that we know today. So I thought it would be fun to just kind of jump in and take a look at some of the text itself. So rather than me just kind of talking at you about it, might be fun for you to just see it and see what you think of it yourself. So I sent Kathy just the first chapter, and you'll see that these chapters are actually quite short. So like I said, there's 81 of these chapters in the text, and Kathy, if you could go ahead and put that up on the screen. Thank you. So this is the first chapter, and I'm not going to leave it up on the screen for our whole discussion because I'd rather that we all sort of, that we can all see each other. But I'm going to leave it up for a minute, and I'm going to quit talking for a minute so that you can just read it. And when you read it, what I'm going to ask you to do is read it not so much with your thinking analytic minds, but read it sort of in the way you would maybe engage in Lectio Divina, reading a sacred text and just kind of letting it speak to your spirit, and see what it has to say. All right, so I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let you read that. Is that long enough? Did you have time to read it? Okay. All right then. Yes, thank you, Kathy. So you might be freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, she took it off the screen and I didn't memorize it. Don't worry about that, because as we go through the discussion, I'm going to read some of the individual lines to you. So if you didn't scribble it down or memorize it, it's not a problem. I'd rather that we all just get to see each other rather than than look at the words on the screen. So did anything, in reading that, did anything catch your attention, or did you have any kind of general impression? Just go ahead and speak up.
Well, for me, it follows the same pattern that I followed my life, that the seeking for knowledge, seeking for a meaning is a lifelong journey. It's something that you, if you're inclined, go inward and find the way. For me, it's the same thing as saying that using the word God is a conundrum, because nobody knows. Nobody knows. And nobody knows the way of Tao either. But it all is going to the same place. We're just going by different paths.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Darkness being the gateway to mystery was the part that resonated. Darkness being the gateway to mystery.
And like, what did you feel about that?
It seemed like such a counter to what we talk about in Christianity about the light, coming into the light, and that being the hope of the world, and this being sort of the flip side, but still I could see those as compatible things.
Thank you.
I found a couple of things that really resonated with my kind of Judeo-Christian heritage. And one was just, I think what we just read is very compatible with the Mount Sinai experience, where Moses says, tell me your name, who are you? And God says, I am who I am. And it ties into the whole idea I struggle with a lot, which is that God is not something that can be contained in words or in a book, but is bigger than human understanding.
Thank you.
Ferguson's? You're muted, I think.
Was somebody else going to speak?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
And probably would be better to have stayed muted, but nonetheless, I take things so literally that this is a real stretch for me to allow there to be a statement made that, to my way of understanding, makes no sense because it's the very first line, could you repeat that one for me?
Yes. The Tao that can be told, and that character for told can also be like explained or understood, something like that. So the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao.
Is not the eternal Tao. And then the very next thing was also something that it's not.
Right.
Could you read the second line?
Yes. Yeah. So the first two lines kind of make a little couplet there. So the first two lines say, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name.
Okay. Can you or anybody else aboard this ship, could you help out somebody like myself who just takes things very literally? How do I allow just this openness that accepts and understands what I just heard or read? Do you understand how some of us are really stuck on an island and we're still thinking of specific ways we can get off of it? I don't know.
I am so glad. Tell me your name again. What's your name?
Jean Ferguson.
Jean. Jean, I am so glad that you did not stay muted. I am so glad that you spoke up, because isn't this what so many of us struggle with? we don't like to not know.
That's true. Mhm.
Our brains are actually wired to know. Our brains freak out when they don't know what's going on. And our brains start this, frantic search for something to kind of latch onto so that we can put this, we can put a name on it, we can put it in a category, and we can file it away and we can explain it, we can understand it. I read one time that some study, this is what I read, I don't know how accurate it is or what the study was, but I read that there was a study that showed that we are more afraid of not knowing than we are of physical pain. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Pema Chodron, who's actually a Buddhist teacher and writer.
Yes.
And Pema Chodron has a book called Comfortable with Uncertainty.
Right. Mhm.
Because so many of us aren't. So Jean, I think you've really spoken to a very essential, fundamental
Roadblock.
conundrum. Yes, conundrum.
Roadblock.
Roadblock for this kind of thing, because we're just, and especially in our culture, right? We're not comfortable with mystery in our culture unless it's a mystery novel that we're reading and we know we're going to
Sure.
find out who did it at the end, right? What if we read mystery novels and we still didn't know? I mean, we would be so unsatisfied. That would be terrible.
Or it could make life even more interesting.
It could.
If I may.
Yes, please.
I'm gonna put my husband on the spot here because, well, you said it at the very beginning after we read the paragraph.
Uh-huh.
And it's something, Steve, you've said forever, as long as I've known him. And it's the impermanence of things. Did you not? Could you please say what you said?
It's a rumor that's floating around, yes.
Lean in so we can hear you. It's all about, which is a lot about Buddhism, as far as I understood, the impermanence of things. And maybe that also kind of kicks into the fear of, well, I don't know what's going to happen. What can I do to make it a certain way? And when he would always mention impermanence, I'm kind of going like, what do you mean impermanent? I can feel it, I can touch it, I can smell it and all of that. So why is everything really not here? Does any of that make sense of my
Absolutely.
repeating what I think he says?
Yes, I see a hand up with Dave and Michael. Do you all want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, had to unmute.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the text right in front of me, but I guess what I take from it, there's a sweetness to mystery. And it talks about dark. And I think a lot of us, when we see dark, we freak out and it's like, oh my gosh, there's something horrible. And that's not what I see. The darkness is the unknowingness, if you will, the mystery. And there's something, I guess, sweet in that mystery of not knowing and wanting to maybe know more or unpackage it and look at it in a different sort of way. So I think maybe when some of us read this, we tend to take it too literally or kind of freak out. And I don't take it that way. I guess that's my interpretation, at least.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Christianity has an ancient tradition of mystery and mysticism. I think in our Protestant culture, if you will, we've sort of gone off into the I want to know what's up kind of direction, but Christianity has a richness of mystery and mysticism in it. And one of my favorite quotes is something that St. Augustine supposedly said, which some of you have already kind of alluded to. If you can understand it, it's not God.
Oh.
So I know I just made Jean really nervous right
not
then.
really.
When I said,
No, I'm right with you. I love
I'm
it.
just teasing you.
Yeah.
But yes, so there's this
Great.
idea of something beyond, what we can know and this, this mystery. And I wanted to kind of go on with this idea of naming, which is kind of what we do, right, in our brains. We want to label things. And so the first two lines we've been talking about, but I want to go to the next two lines and kind of add that into the discussion. So I'm going to read the next two lines. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Now, the 10,000 things, by the way, is a phrase used in the Tao Te Ching to just refer to the manifested physical universe, to creation, to the created universe. So that's what the 10,000 things mean, okay? The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. So what do you think about that? What's the impact of naming something or labeling something? And it kind of ties back to what Jean is talking about in the sense of, knowing or not knowing. Yes.
From Stephen Mitchell's translation, where he goes a little further, saying the unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. It's almost Platonic, the eternally real versus the distraction of a million things, which don't get to what really is. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah, and somebody else was about to speak, I think. Somebody whose name in the corner says Janet.
Well, basically it was that I think when we name things, we give it boundaries and a reality. And as long as it remains unnamed, it is much more unknown, greater, and much more of a mystery, something we can explore. So I think the naming is a very important attribute.
Thank you. When I read these lines, I often think about the creation story in Genesis, because how did God create? He said things, right? Let there be light. Oh, there it is. And I think that connection between speaking it and naming it and then the existence of it is kind of intriguing here, with the named being the mother of the 10,000 things. And I'm no Bible scholar, but if I'm remembering correctly, I think Adam got the authority to go name things, didn't he? Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah, so Adam gets to go out and say, okay, you're a zebra and, you're a palm tree and, all of that. So again, here's this naming something which makes it this and not that. And, like someone just said, just like it puts these boundaries on it. I think Janet just said that, and, puts these boundaries around it. Yes, Eileen.
Yeah, there's a certain sense in which being able to name something is a way of controlling it. And I think it might have been Albert Einstein who said that if we can name something, then we think we understand it. And so what you've been saying is also true, that, and I think that's important because to me, these are a series of, the couplets are a series of paradoxes and contradictions. And somehow, in a lot of ways, that makes them more true because they're contradictory.
Well, that was an interesting last statement. Can you add a little bit more to that it makes them more true by being contradictory?
Well, if I were to add anything, then you'd think you understood it.
Good one.
Thanks. No, I think it reflects both the mystery and the humanity, the human need to understand. It embraces a both and.
I see. Thank you. Yes, Dan.
Yeah, and to me, it goes along with naming things, writing them down, and like building monuments to things, to take what humans want to do is take the spiritual and the mysterious and concretize it in some way. And I mean, we just had just this last Sunday, the text was the Transfiguration, where all of this wonderful spiritual stuff happens, and the disciples say, well, let's build some rooms, let's make a temple, let's build a monument. And that's sort of what humans do with the mysterious, is they try to put it in stone.
Yes, Dave and Michael. I don't know which one is which, so I'm just going by your little name in the corner. So I have to call you by both names until you tell me.
I'm Dave. I'm the
Dave,
chatty.
okay, thank you.
I'm the chatty one, I guess.
All right.
I guess what I see too in this is, by naming something, we are putting our spin on it, our interpretation of it. So if we give it a name, kind of getting at what Eileen said, we're saying we understand it, we've judged it, whatever, and this is the name we're going to give you, or it, or whatever. So it somehow connotes that we have this understanding, and we feel honored, or we feel it's our responsibility to give it a name.
We do more than give it a name. We give it a value. We put a value on it. And therein lies a lot of the human animal's confusion, is when they start putting values on it. And then that value becomes their reality, and their reality is sacred. And they get really upset when other people don't accept their values for what's being said. And
Thank you. Yes, I think that was a valuable addition to the conversation. Diana.
These lines and also our discussion keep making me think of the many times that I participated in prayers that started God of many names, God of no name, because to me that always brings me to mind that I can't understand God. I don't need to understand or name God, and yet I can speak to the universe, or whatever. I just like the beginning of prayers that are that way.
Mm-hmm. I remember a piece of music by, oh boy, really reaching back in my memory here. It's so beautiful. Bernadette Farrell, that's called, the name of the song was God Beyond All Names.
Right.
Are you familiar with that? Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful piece of music. Bernadette Farrell, God Beyond All Names. So go listen to it after we're done. It'd be a nice way to end the day. Kathy, did you have your hand up a minute ago to speak?
Well, I was just going to say that to me, I feel like this chapter is kind of dividing things into two categories. It's dividing things into all the things that are unnamed, which is kind of the mystical, and all the things that are named, that is more the the phenomenological world, where we have lots of objects and things. And I just felt like it was kind of setting the stage to saying, here's, there's mystery and there's what we can know, and there's this division between them. And that's just kind of how I saw it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Very literal, like
very literal. I'm gonna get my little whiteboard here and draw something else for y'all, because what Kathy said just reminded me of that. So let's see. Oops, I didn't do it right. Hold on. Okay, so we've got two circles here. We have this one. I didn't take time to color in one side of it, but this is your yin yang symbol that we already looked at. This one is called the Ujji Symbol. And this one, if you've done any Tai Chi or Qigong, you might have stood in Wuji stance. This is empty stance. And this represents sort of this represents the mystery. This represents the undifferentiated, infinite potential before naming, before manifesting into form. If we were going to talk in Buddhist terms, this would be the formlessness and the form here. And the circle of Ujji is often, well, always drawn with a little opening because it's meant to encompass, it's meant to be infinite. And if I draw a circle, it closes something within and outside of the circle. So it's really meant to represent that undifferentiated, infinite potential before manifestation into form. So you have your mystery here, and you have your 10,000 things universe over here. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next two lines. I think those, we'll see if we go beyond that, but we'll go to the next two. So the next two are about desire. And it says, ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. So that's kind of what we've just been talking about, right? The mystery and the manifestation. So how does desire, because we've just talked about naming and how naming might affect that, but what part does desire play in either seeing the mystery or seeing the manifestations? Yes, Jean. Unmute yourself, please. There you go.
For some reason, I think the word desire causes me to think that we're giving it meaning. Does that make any sense at all? Like, wow, I really love this, or oh, I wish I had that. Or I'm just saying that could be a trap into giving something more value than it in reality, meaning the unknowing. The reality is really not knowing for sure. So here we go, giving all these adjectives and adverbs to things and feelings. We're talking about feelings when we talk about desire. And yeah, like Steve says, we create adversaries too. We've seen that more throughout the world than not. So I don't know if that meant anything.
Well, I think that ties back into what Wally was saying earlier in connection to naming, that, you know, with the name, sometimes we also attach a value or a judgment to, you know, whatever it is that we're naming. Yes, thank you. Anything else? Anybody else?
What about when you're naming your children?
Naming is important, isn't it? You know, this is, you know, it's such a big part of our identity. And think about cultures that, you know, have these grand, beautiful rituals and naming ceremonies. Naming is part of a baptism sacrament. You know, so yes, these names are very, very important. Yes, Joanne.
The other thing about the naming and saying the nameless and the named is there's no way to know whether this was a polemic, but Confucius at more or less the same time was talking about the rectification of names, getting everything named properly and making sure that people live up to their names. So
Well,
it's
excuse me, go ahead.
an opposite, possibly a polemical discussion back and forth.
That's a very astute observation, because there are a few lines in the Tao Te Ching that seem a little pointed in that way. And so you do have this sort of different approach between the Taoists and the Confucianists. And You know, there was a very famous Tai Chi master named Cheng Man-ching, who was from Taiwan, and he wrote one of the translations of the Tao Te Ching. And it was kind of interesting because he was really a very Confucianist kind of guy, even though he was a Tai Chi master. And so you can see in some of his commentary, because he did a translation and then commentary on the different chapters, and you can see in some of his commentary that he was having a hard time with some of the more mystical kind of aspects of this, you know, where he was looking for sort of that order. And if it was kind of going off into the mystery side of it, yes, you could see that was not natural, not natural is not the right word. It's not comfortable for him in trying to write some meaningful commentary about that. So your last unit was on Buddhism. Can you tie these lines about desire, ever desireless, one can see the mystery, ever desiring, one can see the manifestations? Because I'm guessing in your Buddhist unit, desire and attachment are big deal in Buddhism. So how can you connect these lines to what you took from that unit? Or can you?
Desire is the place where suffering, we become vulnerable to suffering. So that's why the value of non-desire is great.
And I would say also, if you're not attached or not desiring something, then I see it saying you are open to the mysteries. You're open to looking at more options or more facets, taking the object of desire, or whatever it is, holding it and sort of looking at it from many different angles, if you will, being open to it, not making a judgment on it. I guess that's sort of the way I look at it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Kathy?
Now, I have a question. It might be slightly off the topic, but it's been running through my head, which is from Jesus saying, seek and the door will be open, seek and you will find. And how does seeking relate to desire?
That's a good question. Would somebody like to comment on that?
I guess I'd want to make a distinction between seeking and understanding. So that, I guess that's what I would struggle with.
Okay. Some other thoughts? Are there different kinds of desire? You know, if you're desiring, for example, union with the divine, if you're desiring to follow the teachings of Jesus, is that going to lead to Buddhist suffering? Or are we talking about really different kinds of things?
Or are we talking about what the Ten Commandments called coveting?
Okay. All right. Some good things to think about. One of the things that I think about with these lines, the desiring line, desiring one can see the manifestations. When I think about that line, I think about if I'm desiring something, you know, kind of like when you make up your mind about something, for example, and then it's like you're gonna see things that way through that lens, right? So I'm gonna see what it is that I'm looking for. And, you know, in a way that desire can sort of create what I then perceive, if that makes sense. So that sort of directs our experience of reality, and directs us to perceive reality in a very specific way, as opposed to perceiving the mystery if we're not focused with that desire. So maybe that's something else to think about. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is just this last line, and we won't spend a whole lot of time on that because I want to leave some time for questions or other things that you all want to talk about. But this last line says, so it says darkness, the last two lines, darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. And this character for mystery, like I said, so one of the things I loved about going into the Chinese was that so many of these characters had multiple meanings. And, if you translate, and you have to pick one, so this translator had to pick mystery out of a number of other possibilities there. So some other possibilities there would be the gate to the essence or the gate to the true nature. And so, there's this kind of interesting about this idea of this gateway through this mystery, and that the darkness within darkness is the gateway into this experience of, I won't say understanding, because we've pretty much established that that's not going to happen, but into this experience of this mystery. It makes me think of a Bible verse that says, taste and see that, what's the end of that? That the Lord is good. Is that right? Taste and see that the Lord is good. So it's not like just know it up here. Think that the Lord is good. Think it in your thoughts. But it's like physically, taste it, experience it, take it into yourself, and then see that this is good. And so when I read that last line, that's kind of what I think about, sort of this gateway into this experience, or an inner resonance, perhaps, of awareness more than something, that we're going to analyze or figure out in our heads. Has anybody in this group read The Cloud of Unknowing? Do you know that book? We were talking about Christian mysticism a little while ago. Scott can tell you more about it than I can. It's written in the 14th century by an anonymous monk. Is that right?
A British monk of some sort, yeah, probably.
Okay. Yes. And so this Cloud of Unknowing, I think, is, well, let me interrupt myself. One of the things I've really appreciated about this group tonight is how great you all are about sort of tying things together. I hear you bringing, like, here's this chapter or this line in the Tao Te Ching, you're going, oh, well, that's like, something over here in Buddhism, or that's like something over here in Christianity. And I think there is so much, when you sort of come down to the essence, there's so much commonality. And The Cloud of Unknowing is a wonderful book about just what the title says, about that, entering that mystery of of our inability in our thinking minds to know God, but to go in and experience that, to immerse yourself into this cloud and become part of it, that God then can then reach through and connect with you. So I think there's a lot of overlap here. The other verse that I think about is the one that says, "In God we live and move and have our being." And I thought if there's a way to kind of tie this up before we start just opening up for questions, I think that's it. It's kind of like you could substitute Tao, right? In Tao, we live and move and have our being, just like in God or in the divine and the sacred, we live and move and have our being. I was going to wear a t-shirt tonight for you, and I was too cold, so I didn't wear it. But this is one of my favorite t-shirts. I'm just going to tell you about it. It has these Chinese characters on it. I'll bring it, at show it to you next time. It has these Chinese characters on it that says, 我也不知道, which means I don't know either. And I don't know who thought to put that on a t-shirt, but I thought that could be like our little mantra for tonight. Yeah, I don't know. I also don't know. I don't know either. So that would be a great way to kind of make ourselves, not to make ourselves, but to invite ourselves to explore a little bit of the edge of our comfort zone with knowing and not knowing and mystery. All right, so we've covered a lot, and I wanted to save some time, just, you know, if I've said anything or if something has occurred to you that you'd like to ask about or bring up, let's just open the floor. Open the screen. Yes, Wally.
Wait.
One of my favorite sayings for myself is, he who thinks he knows does not know. He who knows he does not know, knows. And if there's one thing I've learned in 89 years, is there's a lot I don't know. There's more than I don't know than I ever have known. And the mystery, and I call it my ability to handle ambiguity. I'm just open. It's there and it's going to happen. And I know one thing: we are all the same in two ways. We were born and we're going to die, and everything that happens in that period in between is living. And the older I get, the more.
Yeah. Well, Wally, one of the things I found myself saying a lot in my working years, particularly when I was older and I was giving advice to younger workers, is I would say, you know what you know. You're really smart. If you really want to be effective, know what you don't know.
I think the thing that I love and appreciate the most about our faith community and all progressive faith communities, and not even that, but in a broader sense, I really appreciate the fact that we know that we really don't know. And I've, in my mind, just purely in my opinion, hearing people of faith say that they know the answer and the answer is located in this particular place, I don't think I will ever believe that again, because we don't know. And those are the people that I want to be with, people who recognize that we don't know. We're still learning and progressing.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have another touchstone for myself that I use all the time. That I first thought of it when I saw the picture of the Earth from the Hubble telescope with the arrow pointing back and said, "You are here." And I wrote up something at that time, and I wrote, there are 8 billion plus or minus human beings on the Earth. Every one of them with a reality. Every reality is different, and everyone thinks they're right. And it just opened up the complexity of what we're talking about for me.
Right. Does anybody, just 1 second, June. Does anybody know Tara Brach, who's a Buddhist writer?
Yes.
She says, the world is divided into people who think they're right. Yeah. Yes, June, what were you going to say?
What Wally was saying reminds me of reading a book that was photographs taken from space of Earth. And one of the astronauts said, I held up my thumb and the entire Earth was underneath my thumb. And it was like everything we know and hold dear, or don't even know and hold dear, was under that thumb. And it really changed my perspective of everything.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We got a couple more minutes.
This is Robin. It strikes me that Taoism isn't so much about the person and their life, the way you told that first story, but more about the writings and the interpreting the meanings. Is that your take on it?
Let me make sure I understand your question. You mean like in, say, for example, in contrast to Buddhism, where you have Buddha,
Or in
or
contrast-
Christianity with Jesus? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's true. So, in the religious branch of Taoism, with which I have very little familiarity, there are deities, and Lao Tzu, who is the purported author of the Tao Te Ching, is one of them. But in the branch of Taoism that we're talking about here, I think you're absolutely right. There's not sort of like a founder who is an enlightened person or a being who is then, worshipped or, revered in some way like that. So yes, I think it comes more, the tradition of Taoism, I think you're right, comes more from the writings than it does from the history of a particular person.
Beth,
Yes,
you've been an excellent facilitator.
thank you. You've been an excellent group to facilitate. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do next time. As promised, I've made some of you a little uncomfortable with all the mystery and uncertainty tonight. So I'm going to make it up to you next week by talking a little bit more, focusing a little bit more on what some of the basic principles are in the Tao Te Ching and how they have practical application in our lives. So that's my little teaser for next week. So thank you all for being such a great group. And I can see why this is, some of you at the beginning were talking about what a successful series this has been. And I think that just reflects what I'm seeing tonight with your own openness and curiosity and engagement with the materials that you're encountering. So great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will see you all next week.
Thank you so
I
much.
look forward to it.
Thank you, Beth.
Good night.
Yeah,
And
good night.
let me invite people, as I said at the beginning, to leave a comment saying I was here and here are some things I might like to think about next, or leave your email address. And we're going to keep that invitation open for the next few weeks. We're scheduled to go to March 14th now as our last class on this particular series. And so if you want to have a suggestion about what we do next, please drop it in the chat before you log off.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I'll leave this open for another minute or two. So anybody who wants to can write things in the chat. And then you can also email either me or Dan or Scott or anyone and just say, more classes on this, or more, discussion group around this topic, or this time of day would work great for me, or any of the things that Dan suggested.
Kathy, can I putting things in the chat, is there some way for me to put my email on here so if people have questions or anything, they could get a hold of me?
Can you click on chat at the bottom of your screen and then type it in?
I can try to do that.
And then
type message here. Okay.
If you have difficulty, I can put it in there for you, but.
So everybody can see this?
Yes, there it is.
Okay, like magic. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, everybody's welcome to get a hold of me anytime, and let me know if you have any comments or questions or something you'd like for me to focus on next week. All right. So I'm going to go off and let you all attend to your administrative issues here, and I hope you all have a great week. Thanks so much.
Thank you. You're a great
Bye.
teacher.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, all the authorities are gone now, so we can say whatever we want.
Oh,
She-
dear.
It was good to see Jean Ferguson here. For
Oh,
those who
well-
haven't met her yet, she's been in church a couple of times now and is an unforgettable new addition to our community.
Oh, dear. Thank you,
And,
Dan. You made it possible. Thank you.
Well, she came, our church was recommended to her by her previous pastor, who happens to be my sister. So it's a,
I love it. I love
it's a
it.
small world. She's a transfer from Colorado.
Yeah, and I'm just stunned at the full circle that I'm experiencing coming to this church. The fact is, here you are, and I've mentioned in church that I got to be with IHN, now Family Promise, 1997 in Colorado, when it first opened church doors for homeless families. And here, what, 97 or 25 years later, I'm a member now, or joining with a Family Promise host church. I mean, it's just kind of wonderful that
She's delightful.
the cycle keeps stays in motion.
And Jean, I just wanted to say, I'm Judy. I'm the one you met just before you left on Sunday.
Oh, that's right. Hi,
At the church
Judy.
door. And I didn't say it earlier, but your comment was about not understanding what you were hearing, was like, oh yeah, I get that. And I am very quiet when that happens to me. I don't say anything and I go, you don't even know what they just said, but you just listen. It will become clearer. Somebody will say something and it will help clarity. So you were very brave to say, what was that? And so, yeah, so
Well,
that
but
is
you
interesting because I think we all have to interpret it from everything we know and then just listen to what other people share. And then I think we learn.
You just said the most important word, and that is the word listen. I have a lot to learn and a lot to practice and I can keep showing up and participating, but I need to listen. And there are
And
wonderful
Judy,
things to hear.
Judy, it's what we think we know.
That's right. Yeah, what we think we know. Yes, yeah, and it's, well, some people have studied a lot more things than I have. And so there are people who are more educated in certain areas, certainly, than I am. But it's with any situation. If you don't know, just be quiet a while and maybe you'll know more.
Mhm.
So I look forward next week to having more of it explained to me, a little bit.
I just have a quick technical question. We missed last Monday night's second part of Buddhism. Is that available on YouTube or anything?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
It's
very good.
available. We sent out an email about how to access our online resources with a link to our YouTube channel.
Huh, a specific email to that
Yeah.
effect?
Yeah, and also trying to think, well, I don't know, are you on Facebook?
I'm a Facebook flunky. I've just way too many bells and whistles, and I try to say too much and too little. So
Yeah, well, I'll try to send you a link to it. I don't know if I have your email.
My email, the Highlander.
So, yeah, so Jean, have you gotten on the general Southminster email list? Have you gotten any like Thursday afternoon newsletters?
I do get the Thursday newsletter.
Well, it was on there. It's linked on there. If you look at your
Okay.
Thursday newsletter, there
Mhm.
is a link there. There's a little topic about how do you see our things online? And it
Okay.
says click here and that kind of thing. See if that'll work for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm still working on getting that fine tuned.
And I missed one of the weeks and I was able to do that. It was very, very easy. Like just
Great.
clicking on the church service when we only had virtual.
There
Very
is
great.
one week that I didn't record, and that was
Right.
one of the
Mhm.
Hinduism weeks I didn't record. Just spaced it out. Bye, Wally. Okay.
Okay,
well,
thank you all. I think we've got comments from almost everybody now. So as long as
awesome.
Kathy successfully saves all this, we're
Well, if they
Great.
sent it directly to you, I don't know if I get it. I got
Oh.
everything that went to everyone.
some of them went directly to me.
If they went directly to you, you better copy them and put them in a text file.
Oh, how do You might have to tell me how to do that.
Just put your mouse there and
Control
drag
A.
up and drag through all the things and do copy and then
Dan,
open some kind
What?
of thing
Control
and do
A
paste.
will select everything.
And the whole chat window?
Yeah, click in the
yeah, it
chat
does.
window and
Right
do
click
copy.
and copy.
It does. It gets me everything. Okay, I'm gonna copy that out just to make sure I
And
get
go
it.
make yourself a text file with it.
Okay, that's cool.
Copy it to an
Thank you.
email to Kathy.
You just want to share all
I-
those things with
Kathy,
me.
you are our guru.
I'm,
Awesome.
I'm so tempted to say, well, none of it exists anyway. Pardon me.
So ephemeral.
It's the
Oh,
unknown.
now the stuff we
The
worry about, right?
unknown.
Well, I'm just so curious about everybody's thoughts about all this. So I think it'll be great. And I appreciate having the chance to, hear about this. I think it's interesting. Anyway, I'm going to end the meeting for everyone. So go and enjoy the rest of your evenings and
Sweet dreams.
yeah.
All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good
Kathy.
night. Thank you.